Welcome, everybody, to episode 43 of the Doctrines of Rad podcast. I'm one of the hosts. I'm Drew. My co-host Logan is not going to make it here today. He's got some other things going on, and we are pre-recording this one, so it isn't live, so you're probably watching this on a Wednesday or a Thursday, but I am extremely excited and pleased to welcome our guest who we're going to interview today. His name is Ben Zeisloft. He is the editor-in-chief of the Republic Sentinel. It's a conservative news and commentary outlet. And the bonus part is it is owned by Christians. So it is a Christian commentary and news outlet. He was also, at one time, he was a staff reporter for the Daily Wire, which is maybe where you have first heard of him. That was certainly where I had heard from him. And he's also done some other work in some smaller outlets. He graduated from University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School. So welcome, Ben.
Thanks, brother. Good to be here.
Yeah, man. I've really super excited to have you on. I had been trying to, I don't know if you noticed on Twitter over the past month, but I would drop little notes on your posts and say, hey, podcast, me, you, like trying to get your attention. And you finally followed me back, and I was able to get you in the DM. So very excited to have you here, man. Brother, I appreciate all the work that you've been doing. You are active on social media. You are actively engaged in the conversation that our culture and society is having, which is a very important piece for us as believers. So tell me a little bit about the Republic Sentinel. Tell me about how you got involved in that, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ben Zeisloft. I'm the editor of the Republic Sentinel, as you mentioned. We are a conservative news outlet that is owned and operated by Christians. So the conversation that you mentioned is largely centered around the need, or the danger of Christless conservatism and the need for Christians to be involved in the public square. So that's what we're trying to do from a journalistic standpoint. It's not that every single article is going to have Bible verses in it, or is going to be preaching a sermon. We're covering the news of the day, whether it's the Second Amendment, whether it's military, the economy, something cultural, something in sports. We're covering it honestly and ethically, and we're doing it as we would Christians. I love the Martin Luther quote where he talks about how the Christian shoemaker doesn't etch Bible verses into the side of each shoe, but he just makes excellent shoes because God cares about good craftsmanship. So that's what we're trying to do at Sentinel.
That's great, man. How important is that in your opinion to have a network that is solely Christian versus obviously you have experience in other places that are not inherently Christian, maybe just conservative in some ways. How important is that for you? B, how does that feel, the difference in working in those two different types?
Yeah, it's you can definitely tell the difference. So I've been around a few media outlets over the past couple of years, heading into my second half of college and then graduating, entering the workforce. And it does certainly matter what your style guide says about how you cover certain things. So that's especially true of abortion, transgenderism, homosexuality. Are you using terms like biological male? Are you using preferred pronouns? Or are you just saying, hey, this is a man who thinks he's a woman? And you don't say terminating pregnancies, you say killing babies or murdering babies. And so that certainly matters. And even the content of what we decide to cover is important too. So now I'm spending a lot of time looking at other conservative outlets and seeing how they cover things and what they cover. And I was just looking at Outkick Sports a few weeks ago, and I was noticing that half of their articles are basically pornography. So you're not going to see anything like that at the Sentinel, even though it's the Outkick is supposed to be a conservative sports outlet, and they're new and hot on the scene, but they're offering basically softcore porn. We're not going to do that because we're Christians.
That's great. And so how much of an impact? Well, I guess let's kind of maybe talk about the journey of how you got there. You went to, did you go to school specifically for journalism?
I did not. So I went to business school. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So how did were you always passionate about journalism and it just kind of fell into it, or did God change your heart in the midst of business school?
Yeah, it was very providential. I definitely didn't go out seeking journalism or anything like that. So I've always loved to write, though. So I was involved in a campus newspaper, conservative campus newspaper. And in 2020, I was looking at jobs and internships and looking at venture capital, something to that effect, startups. And all those doors, of course, shut because of COVID, except for one through the campus newspaper's parent organization at another conservative outlet. down in DC. So that's how I got into the conservative journalism world. I love the people. We're all very close knit across outlets and so forth as well. So that's what led to. So that was the Spectator, also writing for Campus Reform, later the Daily Wire, and now the Sentinel.
So you went from doing some campus type reporting. What was that like in the term of, obviously, we hear all kinds of stuff about how liberal and left leaning these schools are. I mean, it's some of it, they go to extremes. What was that like as an introduction to writing conservative content, and how was that received on the campus? What kind of feedback did you get?
Yeah, there really is a certain radical 5%, even at a place like the University of Pennsylvania, that really will get in your throats, get in your face. Most people were willing to have a conversation, but there are a few instances where people wanted to shut you down. I remember a few weeks into my freshman year, I just gotten involved in our campus newspaper, our conservative campus newspaper. And I was handing out copies on the college campus, and this old professor came up and shouted in my face and said, "I hope you change your mind by the time you're older." And I was like, "I probably won't, but thanks for stopping by." So there are instances like that, but in my classes and so forth, I could be like the token conservative or maybe economic libertarian, and actually start a dialogue and a conversation. So not as bad as you would think, but certainly that pressure is there. Yeah.
Yeah. When you see, like, what was it like? Were there more liberal, publications also coming out at the same time?
Yeah, there were. So that's the Daily Pennsylvanian on Penn's campus is the token, censor left, really increasingly left publication at Penn. So we were always the counter to them. Much smaller, of course, because there aren't nearly as many conservatives as liberals or progressives at a place like Penn. But that was, I guess, our competition.
Yeah, what would you say is the percentage-wise when it comes to conservatives and liberals at that school?
That's a good question. I know that Wharton, which is Penn's business school, is actually one of the most conservative parts of the Ivy League. So I think it's like 30% libertarian Republican, but like the general student population is, of course, overwhelmingly liberal.
Yeah, what do you attribute that to? What do you think is the driving force behind all of these liberal folks ending up in college? And is it the professors that are turning them liberal? Or are they already liberal when they get there? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think all of academia is basically down that direction at this point. It's been several decades in the making. The long, slow march through the institutions that the communists and the Marxists have done. So there's incentives to hire Marxists and to recruit students who are Marxist, especially at the PhD and teaching level. I think increasingly I see high school students more liberal. Maybe that's a fruit of parents not paying attention. I know that my own hometown where I grew up, it's 2/3 red. We voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in 2016, 2020, and those students are shockingly liberal. And all their parents are conservative, and it's like, what are you doing? But yeah, I think it's a fruit of at least at the post-secondary level, it's a fruit of the professors recruiting people who already agree with them, and I think that's probably what it could be attributed to. Yeah.
Interesting. And do you think that there's a level of folks that come in kind of middle ground that get pushed over into that one side or the other?
Yeah, so it's the same problem that you see in the media, where what we're told is the middle ground is actually center left. So if you read a media outlet that purports to be unbiased, something like the Associated Press, something like Axios, it's actually center left. The conservative, and then the normal conservative, or maybe slightly to the right conservative, is like the extremist, right? That's the all the left wing nonprofits will call those people purveyors of hate speech or spreaders of disinformation, when really they're just the other side. But the people in those institutions don't know that.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Do you feel like your time on campus, did it help to solidify your conservative position? Did it drive you more to extremism, as they would say, which we would just consider to be just kind of based? How was that for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I grew up nominally Christian. My parents are believers, but I was nominal. So really my first year of school was actually becoming a Christian, being regenerated. Being, and part of that was being around Christian conservative students who really knew their Bibles. I didn't know my Bible, And as a result of that, I would say that most conservative politics is a natural outflowing of the biblical worldview. As a result of that, they were pretty conservative, so that's how I met a lot of them. But then I saw that their faith was driving it. So once that equation was settled, I'd always been conservative through the whole process politically, but having the worldview foundation was meaningful as well. It equipped me to better engage these things. And as 2020 rolled around, so that was halfway through my college experience, I was able to see things more clearly for what they were. Seeing that there's no such thing as a neutral space in something like government, that Black Lives Matter riots were worship services, things of that nature. So that's how I developed in that sense.
It sounds to me like the years of COVID 2020 on really helped to kind of push you more towards Christ. I mean, that's if you were a nominal Christian coming into school and you were in there and in 2020 is happening, you're seeing just the blatant hypocrisy that's going on in the media, in our country, in our government. Some people will just take that as just a shutdown. I'm not going to be involved in anything anymore. It sounds like that was the way that the Lord kind of drew you closer to Him.
Yeah,
Would
for
you
sure.
agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you see that across a lot of people. It's been really encouraging these past few years to see people realize the severity of what we're up against in terms of the government overreach, and addressing that from not just a conservative political standpoint, but from a religious Christian standpoint is extremely important.
So walk me through this kind of regeneration process that you had, being a nominal Christian in school. What was it? Obviously, we know it's the Lord that does the drawing. We know it's God that does the work. But what kind of circumstances were you in that began to open your eyes and wake you up and make you feel like I need to lean on Christ even more than what I have been?
Yeah, brother. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, so the other side of Pennsylvania.
I'm from Ohio, by the way.
Okay. You're not an Ohio State fan, are you?
If that's going to divide us, then I'll just say I'll relent to whatever it is that you like.
Okay, no comment. It's not even that I like sports that much, but it's Ohio State. They get on my
rivalry,
nerves. Yeah.
Dude, it's 100%, man. I'm not a big college sports fan at all, but there's always been that ingrained, Ohio, Michigan, Pittsburgh and Cleveland sort of rivalry that's existed. But yeah, anyway, I digress, of course, throwing you off a little bit.
Sorry. Yeah, my bad. So as I mentioned, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I grew up in a mega church, so second biggest church in the Pittsburgh area.
Okay.
My parents were believers. My grandparents were believers. And I was not a believer. I grew up going to church on Sundays and Wednesday nights and going on mission trips and so forth. And I there's evidence to point that God was working on me from a young age, but I think I was unregenerate. I didn't really care for the things of God, didn't really have a relationship with Christ. There were moments where I would get into my Bible or start reading books more than I had, but it would fade away after a few months or something to that effect. And something my dad had especially pushed into me before I went to college was the importance of getting involved in a college fellowship of some sort, and hopefully at church too. He had gone to UC Berkeley for his master's, and that's of course one of the most liberal schools in the entire country. And he was always talking about, even from a young age, he would mention this from time to time, how his faith grew tremendously just being pressured by the outside environment at a place like Berkeley, and then going back to Christian brothers and sisters who can sharpen you and help you answer those apologetic questions. So yeah, that was the first thing I did when I came to Penn, is I found a couple of Christian fellowships, and I got involved in the Bible study, and the couple of guys who were leading it were not much older than me. They're juniors and seniors, but they knew the Bibles like the back of their hands. If we had a question, they would say, turn to 2 Peter 1, turn to Psalm 110, turn to John 3. I didn't even have a concept of somebody knowing the Bible that well that they could turn to a passage, just asking any question, knowing it to that extent. So that got me reading my Bible. I got it to some extent involved in the party scene, so going and just drinking and things like that. And after a few months, I came to the point where I had to kind of pick, who was I going to serve? Was I going to serve myself and just enjoy the college experience, or was it going to serve the Lord? So I sort of set aside those college vices and kept reading my Bible. I think I read James first, and then I read John. And then around John 6, it's like an arrow went through my heart.
No kidding.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That is amazing, man. It's so that's very encouraging to hear too. I have a 20-year-old son who is married. He's been married now for about 2 years. He raised in our home. My wife and I both love the Lord. We covenanted our marriage to serve God, and that was our goal. And we knew that whatever we were going to do, that we were going to rely on God for that. And that includes our children. That includes, raising them up with the gospel being lived out, taught, and just, we never wanted to be surfacey. We knew that if we were going to get married, it had to be to honor God. But I'm a realist. I'm not, I know that my son has to have his moment of coming to Christ on his own. And I do pray for that. And just hearing your story, it sounds like you have a kind of a similar background to my own son, where raised in a church home or Christian home, but never really adopting it for yourself. And my hope is that, God puts us through breaking moments where we have something is taken away from us, something is stripped from us, or we just get surrounded by evil, which sounds like that was kind of your case. You were surrounded on all sides by, armies of darkness, and it really caused you to have to realize, like, hey, I can't do this on my own. And that's my hope for my own kid too. So that's encouraging to hear that you had that moment, and that I'm praying for that for my son. So you obviously you have this you're writing. You have this kind of newfound passion for serving the Lord. Kind of walk me through, I guess, from that point in your real conversion, where you really truly trusted in Christ, to graduating and getting picked up by a big outlet like the Daily Wire. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and I will add to that last part too. So, thanks for sharing about your son. But one of the first fruits of my conversion was I bickered all the time with my parents in high school. I was very independent minded, so I would fight with them, and it was almost every day there was some kind of a blow up. And then I came home after that first school year, and I lived with them for the summer as I had an internship, and I don't think we fought a single time. It was amazing,
Wow.
So God really worked in my life pretty instantly, at least on that front.
No, thank you for that, because that is, we don't have any real fights. I actually feel I'm very close to my son.
Mm-hmm.
But I do see, I've been 20. I know what it was like. I know when the cares of the world seem to be important, and they kind of can draw you away. So again, I'm not trying to, I know that it's God that does the work. Like I have to have contentment in the work of Christ. I can't do it on my own, and I never believed that I could. So if I don't live that out, then I'm just being a hypocrite.
Right. Amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And with respect to your other question, yeah. So getting into, I suppose listening to sermons and getting into the Reformed faith, especially over the past few years, the presuppositional apologetic reality has really undergirded a lot of my work in the conservative media sphere. So that's why I'm so thankful to be at the Sentinel, is because there's no neutrality, right? There's no such thing as neutral news coverage. It may not be, a sermon in every article, but it's going to have a worldview, and it's going to have a telos. So that, I suppose, sense has been with me for the past few years as I graduated and started to get involved in different outlets.
Yeah. So you, as you were kind of exploring this newfound this desire and this ability to write, which is really cool. How were you putting yourself out there as a journalist? Were you trying to find places that would work with you, and how did that process come about?
Yeah, so it sort of happened by accident, like I said, by God,
okay.
Really nothing by accident, but God's providence, of course.
Yeah.
So I started with an internship in the summer of 2020 in DC with The Spectator. And then my superior there, my editor there, said you should apply to this place called Campus Reform. So I did. So that's the conservative college students who contribute to that outlet. And then the managing editor of Campus Reform, the editor-in-chief of Campus Reform became the managing editor at the Daily Wire. So I sent him an email, and that's how I got my foot in the door there. Yeah. And then I was there in the summer of 2021 for my next internship, just writing news and things of that nature, which led to a full-time job, and then which led to the Sentinel. Yeah.
Well, praise God. So did you have a chance to meet any of those guys face to face, like Ben or Candace or Andrew?
I did, yeah. So I know, I've gotten to meet Michael Knowles and Matt, and I met Candace briefly. Yeah, Knowles is a great guy. He's a really nice guy.
Oh man,
Yeah.
he's one of those Catholics that I'm like, he loves Jesus, man. I know he does. We just need to get him over to the Protestant side, and particularly the Reform side, which actually brings up a question I have for you. If were your parents in a Reformed church? Well, you said a mega church, so it's probably not a Reformed church. How were you introduced to Reformed theology and the doctrines of grace?
Yeah, so those older students who were running those Bible studies, they were Reformed Baptist, Presbyterian. They went to 10th Presbyterian Church, which is where we go to church now. Even though I'm Reformed Baptist, I still love my Presbyterian brothers. So I've been a member there for 2 or 3 years at this point. My wife just became a member earlier this year. Yeah.
Praise God. And speaking of your wife, I think you said recently that you celebrated, was it 3 years?
1 year. Yeah, 1 year of marriage.
Oh, 1 year. Oh, okay. Wow. So did you meet your wife at school?
I did, yeah. So I was her econ tutor.
Really?
I was a sophomore and she was a freshman. Yeah.
Oh man,
yes.
That's awesome. Tell me, like, what was the spark for you guys? What was the moment where you're like, we need to solidify this, officiate it, make it a covenant?
Yeah. So we knew we were both Christians after a few weeks of tutoring. So I helped plug her into some of those campus fellowships, invited her to church at 10th. And she went through her own conversion experience at the beginning of COVID. So we didn't see each other for a few years. Wow. I think from I guess like spring of 2020 to summer of 2021. So we would stay in touch, and she was growing in her own faith and I was growing in mine. We would exchange text messages, call every once in a while. I don't think either of us were really thinking about dating the other. At that point, we were just kind of casual friends.
Yeah.
And then when I was in Nashville that summer, she came up with her brother to visit their cousins, and we hung out for a little bit, and we started to like each other. So from there, it moved from, we dated for 7 months. In my senior year, her junior year, I proposed March of last year. We got married in July of last year. So we moved pretty quick. Yeah.
Praise God, man. The man that finds a wife finds a good thing.
Amen.
How do you feel about being married, and how has that built you up as a man of God? What are some of the benefits that you've experienced?
Yeah, just embracing that responsibility has been good. Having a mind toward, I can't be a boy anymore. I have to provide for not only myself but also my wife. Especially, she's still in school, so I'm the only person earning an income. So having to keep it, be careful with that. And let's see, there's also the selfishness and sanctification elements where,
oh man, yes.
The first year of marriage, you start to see, you're very selfish, and you're more selfish than you realize. And, for us, the way I describe it to people is we have a lot of roommate issues, or I guess we had, not so much anymore.
Sure.
So me wanting to stay up super late and read or work on something or watch something, and, she wants to go to bed early, and just, disagreements about that sort of thing, and learning how to operate with grace toward the other, and compromise and give of yourself and self-sacrifice. So, yeah, but it's been really good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, man. I tell you, just the first few years, I've been married 21 years. So the first, probably the first decade was a lot of learning, a lot of figuring things out. Certainly, like, I was a big gamer. I loved playing video games and staying up late. That's always been the thing that I enjoyed to do, to kind of turn off my brain for a while and decompress. And we had to go through the phases of what is an appropriate amount of gaming. How late is too late to stay up, and plus being in the Navy, I mean, I would deploy often, and there'd be months and months at a time that I wasn't even at home. So you try to concentrate as much time as you can together when you have to be away so often. And so we're at the point now where we both kind of have our own, after 21 years of marriage, you both kind of have your own things that you like and dislike. And she likes to watch shows sometimes or go to bed reading, and I'll try to, I'll stay up and watch my own show or something like that. But it balances out. So don't lose hope, when you feel like you're being restricted on a level, or you're just having to change so much. It does eventually balance out with the spouse. So that's great, man. Praise God for that. And is there any intention for children in the future for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but very soon.
No,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I've always said 24 or 25 would be when we'd get started, and the Lord had different plans. I think I was just turning around 22 when we had our first son, which is cool because I don't feel like I'm in my 40s. I don't feel like I act like I'm in my 40s, and so now I have an adult son that has become far more of a friend in a sense now that he's out making his own decisions, married, and having to take care of his family. So it is always good, man, to start as early as you can because you want to have all those years of your life to pour into your kids, and enjoy it too. Don't start like at 70 because then you're gonna
Yeah, right. Yeah.
you're not gonna have those moments. So
Yep, and we do want a lot of kids. Yeah, we do want a lot of
awesome.
kids. Yeah.
Praise God. Yeah, I would be happy with more. We have four. My oldest being 20, my youngest is 7. I would be happy with having more kids. I think we're at the point now where, as we get older, it definitely becomes more. It's more work when you have younger kids in your 40s. I can't run around the way I used to when I was in my 20s and early 30s. So good for you, man. So Daily Wire, you get picked up with them. You no longer work with them. My opinion on some of the things that I saw through that process was a little disheartening. And I won't go into it. Most people probably already know some of what led to you getting picked up with the Republic Sentinel. So I think that was a better fit for you anyway. The fact that it seems to be that you can express your opinions at the Sentinel without any type of hindrance. Now, as the editor in chief, I don't know a lot of these terms. So what's that responsibility like? What kind of things are you responsible for at the Sentinel?
Yeah, so being the lead editor of the Sentinel, or it's like being the president of a homeschool, right? So we're so small right now. We have one staff reporter. We have a bunch of contributors. We're growing, but we're small. So I'm editing articles. I'm uploading articles. I'm deciding, working with our founders, Zach Lautenschlager and Nathan Barnes, on the direction of the publication, what sort of things we want to cover, how we cover them, how we make money. So it's sort of like I guess it's sort of like a COO. Like I'm an implementer fundamentally right now. So working with both the senior management and also the rest of the team to figure out what we're going to do on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
So if somebody were wanting to, somebody's watching this and they feel that draw to conservative journalism, what are some recommendations that you would make to someone that is like, hey, I would like to do this full time or at least get my feet wet? What are some steps that somebody could take to get involved in doing what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So one really helpful piece of advice I picked up at Daily Wire is don't go to college for journalism. Go to college for some kind of useful subject area. So I studied business and economics. So that's what I did 80 to 90% of the time at the Daily Wire, is covering business news, economic news, breaking news quickly. So if you want to get involved in a publication and you want to stand out, they're going to have 100 journalism majors who are going to apply. But if you can show that you're a good writer and you're an expert in a certain field, or at least developing that expertise, you're going to have a much easier time getting your foot in the door. So that's surface level advice, just in terms of if you want to enter. And of course, writing and reading a lot is critical and important. And most people who are kind of built that way. So from a young age, I kind of knew I'd be doing something with writing, even if it was in the business world. So in the same way, like my younger brother's an engineer, so he was building Legos, our entire childhood, and working on robots and that sort of thing. And I was reading books, right? So if you have a natural, awesome, I suppose, bent in that direction, you should pursue it. And you can certainly succeed in journalism, right? It's an important field, and it's an honorable field, and it has been throughout the history of the country, and more Christians should be involved in it. Yeah.
Well, certainly more Christians nowadays. I mean, the amount of dis and misinformation that some of these journalists put out. I mean, I was raised in a world where if it was published, if it was in a newspaper or on TV, like, we could trust it, or at least we were taught and trained to trust it. So how do you avoid, as a journalist, how do you avoid those pitfalls of falling, into embellishing information?
Right. That's a good question. Yeah, I think that this is where being a Christian comes in, right? Because that temptation exists, right? To want to, you know, ignore a certain factor, maybe not ignore, but downplay it or frame it in a certain way. But then you remember that every idle word will be judged on the last day, right? So telling the truth involves telling the whole truth, right? So not leaving out information. So you can't just ignore certain elements of a story. So for example, this with the young men who were arrested in Wisconsin, that was a big story we broke last week.
Yeah, definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. And we couldn't just ignore the fact, like, what were their charges? What were they actually charged with? Were those legitimate charges? So, last week I was on the American Reformer podcast and I was talking about these things. And I said, well, I don't know if they broke the law or not. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to just go and defend them. But I will point out on a commentary level, it is noteworthy that the police went after the conservatives, the Christians, but not the leftists who were grooming children. So you can't just blindly, accept everything that your side has to say. Another thing that I've noticed at a lot of conservative outlets is the willingness to disrespect Democratic leaders. And this is also where being a Christian comes in, is because we're told to pray for our leaders, to pray for their conversion, to honor them to the extent that they're honoring God. So even something like you're not going to find an unflattering picture of Joe Biden or Kamala Harris on our front page. You're just not going to. We're going to pick, no matter what side they're on, we're going to pick a picture where they, look pretty good or look presentable, look like themselves, not some weird close-up or something to that effect. Because we want to be respectful even to those we disagree with, and especially those who God has put in authority over us, even if we disagree with them on a political level.
Yeah, and that's got to be interesting from knowing that you're kind of in the middle of this process of journalism, and you can see some of the temptations to give over to a narrative or to leave out certain information. Do you have different eyes now when you read articles from other places? Do you feel like you see so much, more exposed even in what they lack in what they put in their articles?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. So I like Axios, right? That is my favorite left-wing publication or center-left publication. But you can tell the way that they talk is you can see exactly where they're coming from and what they're trying to accomplish, right? So covering abortion as reproductive health care, talking about trans rights, right? Like even the words and phrases we use say something about our worldview and push the general public in a certain direction, right? So that's why you see conservative publications talking about biological men, right? It's because they're playing pattyfoot with the leftists to say, well, no, these are actually women. So they want to sort of compromise and say, well, these are biological men. But that raises the question, can somebody be a biological man? And then is there another type of man besides a biological one? I don't think so. Right. So that's why, good. Yeah. So that's why, at the Sentinel, we don't use that phrase. We use man and woman. Right.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw recently that the CEO of Harry's Razors recently went on a weird kind of tirade on birthing person, male birth, or I don't even remember the words. It was so ridiculous, where he just talks about just using such neutered language when it comes to describing what most of us would just consider to be basic truths. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. Then you have a trans man and a trans woman, meaning, a fake man or fake woman. And I listened to Father Calvin Robinson when he had made that point on the Pints with Aquinas podcast. He says it's an easy way to remember which one it is if you just replace the word trans with fake. Then you'll know what their transition is. If it's a trans man, well, it's just a fake man, so it's a biological woman. What are some of the other tactics that journalists will use to support their narrative and kind of drive false truths?
Yeah, so it also really matters what you choose to cover, right? So if you don't cover it at all, then there's not going to be any formation of the opinion around it. So for I guess liberal outlets, left-wing outlets, they're not going to cover Hunter Biden because that makes their favorite politicians look bad. So you can look at analyses where people are looking at how many minutes has CNN or MSNBC spent on the Hunter Biden laptop on his most recent charges, and the answer is not very many, if at all. I remember this too last summer with the Supreme Court justices, how the Roe I guess the Dobbs opinion had leaked, and there were protesters outside their houses, and most media outlets weren't even covering it. And there were a few conservative reporters who were there every single day throughout the entire summer. One of whom, Doug Blair, is now a contributor for us on our breaking news side. Yeah, they're there every single day, reporting on these crazy left-wing activists and Antifa types who are threatening Amy Coney Barrett, threatening Brett Kavanaugh in their own neighborhoods, and then it's just crickets from the legacy media. And that was also true of the firebombing attacks and the vandalism against the pregnancy centers last summer. A good friend of mine, a colleague of mine, Mary Margaret Olahan, who worked at the Daily Wire, is now at the Daily Signal, was one of the few journalists who was actually reporting on that at all, right, on either the left or the right. And I think she just won an award for it, and rightly so. But it really does matter what you choose to cover, and in both the conservative world, the crisis conservative world, and in the left-wing world, there's strong disincentives toward covering certain things.
Yeah, disincentives. I like that. That makes sense. I guess, so in what ways do you determine the relevance in what you're covering? Like if a story, would you say that you get presented a lot of different stories or a lot of different ideas? And then how do you kind of balance, like, there's got to be just ridiculous amounts of things that you could talk about. So what makes you pick and choose the certain ones that you do over other ones? And are there ways to try to, I guess, cover as many as possible?
Yeah, so that's especially frustrating right now, being so small. We're growing a lot. We're about to hit 150,000 email subscribers, which is really exciling.
Wow, man.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes, but in terms of our staff, we're still pretty small. We're recruiting fast, but we're small. So, myself and Zach and Nathan will send several stories throughout the course of the day, like, oh, we should cover this. And then because our staff is so small, we can only cover maybe, less than half of them. I don't know if I have a clear answer on that question in particular.
Sure.
A lot of it is what do you want to cover? What is interesting to you? And as a business and economics reporter by trade, I suppose, and also as a Christian, some of those start to come out. Our staff writer loves to talk about the Second Amendment and the military and some of those political things with the Biden administration. So she covers a lot of those. And we've been actively recruiting folks who have subject area expertise. So we have Rachel Reeves as a contributor for education. She's a homeschool Christian mom down in Virginia. We have John Root contributing for sports now. So he was with
I like John a lot. He's great.
Yeah. So these are people who are areas in a certain subject matter, and they know what to cover and how to cover it very well, better than I could. I hardly know sports at all. I know education a little bit, being a student for most of my life, but I don't have kids. That question is not presented to me very often. So that's what we're trying to do, is just build a really robust team.
That's great, man. The military thing, I certainly, because of my background, I'm very passionate about the way that our military was treated over the COVID thing. I tell you what, it's by God's providence and God's providence alone that I retired when I did. It was November of 2019 when my ceremony went down. We were leaving Washington State to come over here to Missouri, and then all of the mandates began to begin. Yeah, whatever that means. But I tell you, I dodged a bullet. The Lord really saved me and spared me from that, because even as a civilian, after being retired, I had my own frustrations. I can't imagine my brothers and sisters in arms that felt convicted and compelled to avoid these vaccines, that wanted to fight against the mask mandates, and you don't really get much of an opinion in the military. You don't get a say. It's either do what we tell you to do, or hit the road, Jack. Don't come back anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have, if I had been set to retire 2 years later than I was, I don't know that they would have even allowed me to retire. I mean, I would have probably been one of those guys kicked out, which is just a really tragic thing that happens. And I am praying and hoping that a lot more of that gets exposed. And but at the same time, who would want to serve again, even if you're allowed to go back in? Who wants to go serve again after how you were just treated? Wait till the next thing comes along. It's just kind of an endless vicious cycle. So,
Right, and
uh,
I'm glad you brought that up because one of the big projects we're working on right now is a documentary called "SEALs Beat Biden." So it's about how a small handful of Navy SEALs stood up successfully to the Biden administration vaccine mandate, and they got it defeated. So we were
yes.
down in DC a few weeks ago filming with Pastor Jeff Durbin. He was actually the first guy those SEALs went to because they knew that he was both a Christian and that he had a good grasp on law and politics and the historic view of those things in the Western world and in the Christian tradition. So that'll be coming out soon. It's going to be we hope it's going to be a blockbuster. We have a lot of top brass who come and talk to us and go on camera and condemn the Biden military for this horrible leadership they're presenting. And of course, young men are not going to want to join a military where the people who are celebrated are the men who think they're women and are wearing dresses and makeup. One of our opinion contributors is a former Navy SEAL who's featured in that documentary, and he did a great job actually today with an opinion piece discussing all of that. So there's very little that's compelling, conservative men who are from especially the American South who historically have made up most of the military from wanting to join up.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird too. I didn't throughout my entire 20-year career, man. Like I never really saw very many people that were struggling with their gender gender ideology, gender dysmorphia. I was active duty when Don't Ask, Don't Tell got repealed. In fact, my first 4 years of service, they were still kicking out homosexuals. If you were found out to be gay, you were not going to be able to serve. And so I served in the midst of watching homosexuals be removed, then the repealing of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So now they can openly serve. Now the Navy, in my case, the Navy was paying homosexual couples to be married, giving them the stipends that the traditional marriage folks or real marriage folks were getting. And then towards the end, like my last year, I saw a surge of trans individuals. It was mind blowing. It felt like it literally came out of nowhere.
Sheesh.
I mean, seriously. I mean, it was. I had my own struggles. Towards the end of my career, I was dealing with a lot of depression. I had a lot of spiritual warfare going on in my life, and there was a lot of stress coming up on retirement. What am I going to do when I get out? How am I going to be a civilian? Because I don't know anything other than the Navy since high school. And so I had a lot of stress. I was an alcoholic. I've been sober now for it's going to be 4 or 5 years, but I don't even count anymore. I'm sober, so I'm happy. The Lord's delivered me from that. But I was working at the hospital, the Naval Hospital in Bremerton, Washington, and I started to see these guys that were, submariners that were dealing with gender body dysmorphia and all of that, and it was like it was not there one day, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere. And I think the military is a microcosm for our society, right? And typically the things that we deal with in the military, they seem to trail behind what's going on in society, but then it kind of catches up. So like with the gay marriage thing, society was already doing it one way. The Navy or the military took a while to adopt what the rest of society was doing. And then once they did, it was an explosion of now, it's at the point where the White House is putting pride flags everywhere. We had to go to training on inclusion and diversity. We'd have to sit through those things. And it never really, I guess, dawned on me like the severity of what was happening in our culture. But now that I'm out and I'm seeing it from a much different perspective, it's like, oh, that was there, and it really is it's going to be the destruction of our government. Well, it's going to be the destruction of our military for sure. Just the same way that that gay marriage has infiltrated and has wrought everything from drag queen story hour to all these pride events to basically being a bigot if you don't celebrate what they do. Our society is crumbling and the military is going to be next for sure.
Yeah. One of the questions we tackle in our documentary is how historically the most trusted institution in the United States, which has been the military, had to be corrected by the least trusted, which is Congress, right? So they had to. It was Congress through the NDAA that reversed the vaccine mandate. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, as a civilian, my grandfather, who I never met, served in the Navy. But beyond that, there's not too much. I had some uncles and cousins who served in the military too. But I'm mostly a civilian who doesn't know all that much about the military. And I'm watching this and just seeing the insanity that they're letting into the ranks. I'm seeing on the DoD's website they have a whole feature for Pride Month about this guy named Rachel Jones who's wearing a dress and a weird wig, working at a computer. And I'm like, what is going on? And you see that too with the abortion policy. They're now funding military members to go to other states and get abortions. I think to the tune of 4,000, if I'm not mistaken. And then you see the media. So this is where it comes full circle, right? The media is absolutely destroying Senator Tommy Tuberville for it because he's standing up and saying, I'm not going to let any military promotions happen until this is reversed, and he's being heroic. But it's like we're trying the best we can to invoke the judgment of God on our nation, and at the highest levels, right? This military, which is far from having anything looking like a just war theory from a Christian standpoint, it is instead just adopting neo-pagan child sacrifice, which is what abortion is.
Yeah, and the just war theory, I think that's a great point that you bring up. I, as a GI Joe, I was all in. With the entire Afghanistan conflict was during my time in service. The 20 years. So, I was bought, hook, line, and sinker to doing whatever the military would do. I thought that what we were doing was right. I felt like what we were doing was good for our country, and it really took 2020 and on for the Lord to strip that idol from me. I didn't realize how much of an idol it truly was in my life. I would have done anything, and didn't question it. And looking back now, it's like, holy cow! Like, are you serious? Like, I was really buying into. Why were we in Afghanistan? Why did we do the things that we did? I did 2 tours in Guantanamo Bay doing the detainee operations out there. That was kind of my big contribution for the operations that were over there. I was bought in to everything. I believed whatever they told me, and I think that. Do you think that we're seeing culturally a lack of, in a good way, a lack of reliance on our military now and on our government? Like, what have you seen shift in just your short time in journalism with the way that our society views the way, the government and the war machine and all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I don't know so much about the war machine. Like I said, I think there's less of an enthusiasm or support for the armed forces. Last week I wrote about how support for the armed forces has reached its lowest level in 2 decades because of the Afghanistan withdrawal, but also because you have Mark Milley going before Congress and talking about how he wants to understand white rage. Like, what on earth?
Right.
Yeah. But I think, that's a great point, is the local reliance that has made America great historically. I think you're seeing that just start to come back, right? So you see the parents who are going to their school boards and saying, hey, we don't want to tolerate this. Whereas before, they would just let their kids go to school and maybe hardly even ever ask what they're learning. Now they're discovering that in that absence of their oversight, these public school people are pushing, gender queer and these disgusting, graphic novels and just an overall leftist indoctrination on their kids, and they're pushing back. And then in the reformed world, you see like a county before country mentality. Like, how do we take care of our people before we care about like who the president of the United States is? I think that's a really good attitude to have. That's what's made America great. That's what provoked the American Revolution, in my opinion. Is we don't need some foreign power telling us how to live. We can do it ourselves. We're competent people, and I think there's a long way to go for Americans, and especially Christian Americans, to regain that self-dependence and that self-reliance. But I think we're moving in that direction. I think 2020 has opened a lot of people up to that.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I don't know where you really stand on the goal of Christian nationalism. I would have thought that was a buzzword or a bad word for a while, many years ago. But I certainly have changed my opinion on it when it really comes to our society and putting Christ first and putting God's law first. it has really opened my eyes to see like how far we have fallen into idolatry in our legal system, in the government, in our military, and all that. Where do you stand on that? And if you want to talk about it, if you don't, that's fine too. But what are some of your thoughts?
No, for sure. I know it's a hot button issue right now, but I don't know if I describe myself as a Christian nationalist. I don't know about that terminology, but
Yeah.
like I said, I'm presuppositional. I'm definitely a theonomist, right? So I think that our laws should be influenced by God's standards, by the Bible.
Amen.
I think we can go to our lawmakers and say, murder is bad, abortion is bad, and not because, not merely because, I should say, a baby is a human from conception, but because God said to Moses on Mount Sinai that you shall not murder. I think we can totally do that as American Christians, and we should more often.
Yeah.
So in terms of the mechanics of how that would work, establishing a Christian government, I'm not quite sure. What I think Christians need to do right now is preach the gospel, right? We know that these, I think I kind of see that as, something like a federal Christian government is only going to come as a fruit of something like a third great awakening.
That's exactly right, brother. That's exactly right.
Yeah, where if we reclaim, the historic Christian faith we've held in the United States, and if God is so kind as to grant, an outpouring of His Holy Spirit, reformation within the broader American church, revival in the culture, I think, we certainly could, in principle, have something like a Christian government where we openly acknowledge Christ as Lord, because we know that whether or not officials recognize that He is Lord over all governments. Yeah, He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, man. I'm the same way. I definitely see the Christian nationalism or the theonomist goal as far down the pipe in the future, because we can't sort it out so quickly, and we won't be able to sort it out so quickly. But if we maintain our focus on the gospel and on changing the individual hearts, it by nature, what you said is great. The fruit of that will be that we will honor God in our law, and we will honor God in our government, because people want to honor God because their hearts have been changed. You can't go the opposite way and enforce all these laws on people and demand that they honor God, because that's not how that's never worked, and that's not really how the Lord shows us in Scripture. It is a presentation of the gospel, which is the power of God for salvation. God changes the heart of the person. He changes their affections towards Him. And when we are led by the Holy Spirit, why wouldn't we uphold the good things of God by our very nature? Because He changes our nature. So
that's right.
Yeah, very good, man.
Yeah, and I know that we're both abolitionists, right? So the flip side of that is, it's not to say that even today Christians cannot or should not try to influence law and policy in the United States, right? So the two of us and a lot of our friends want to see these abolition bills get passed across the nation. And, just because a broad swath of the American public disagrees with the fact that, murdering a baby is bad and should be punished under law, doesn't mean that we shouldn't stop calling, or doesn't mean that we should stop calling for that, right?
No,
it's
absolutely.
It's neighbor love to say that it should be illegal to kill our neighbors. Yes.
Oh, 100%, man. It's such a delusion when it comes to the pro-choice movement and even the pro-life movement. There's a lot of delusion there too. But that really is kind of a microcosm with what's wrong with society as a whole, is that there is no foundational objective truth anymore. We want to cater to feelings. We want to cater to experience, and we don't even want to talk about God. We want to deny God. And so why wouldn't the rest of the way that we operate reflect that? And abortion is one of those main things. I think we will see about abortion abolished in, maybe not in my lifetime, but perhaps in your lifetime, God willing. I think that is a very tenable goal. I think it's a very realistic one, because the amount of hypocrisy that exists in these laws that claim to be for life and liberty, they're hypocritical. It's only some life. It's not all life. And I think there will be a great period of mourning when the science does catch up to reality, and we see very clearly that life begins at conception. And I think it's totally possible, man. But we need guys that are your age. We need guys and gals that are your age that are leading the cause. Because guys like me, like in my 40s, and I know I still have a lot of time. I mean, God knows how much time I actually have, but statistically speaking, I have probably another lifetime to live up to this point. So, but things get slower and things get harder to do, and so we need to pour in and disciple and mentor people that are your age, and there needs to be a real coming surge of change. Like there was a recent poll or something that had came out, and I don't know if it was you guys that ran it or if somebody maybe one commented on it, but that young men are leaning more conservative nowadays. Do you want to speak to that at all? Like what your thoughts are, being that that's kind of your generation?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think I did see that too. That especially post 2020, young men are surging conservative and young ladies are surging liberal. And I think this gets into the broad conversation around folks like Andrew Tate, masculinity, right?
Yeah.
If we keep, telling young men that they're worthless, that they're just the Ken to the greater and better Barbie, you're going to have pushback against it. And I think it's a good thing, right? So I think we need to be reaching those young men for Christ. This gets into the story that we were publishing last week, where there's a 19-year-old in Wisconsin who was simply reading from the Bible from Galatians 5 at a drag queen story hour event. And, you see in the video that he gets, attacked by, that's an exaggeration, excuse me. He gets surrounded by a bunch of cops and they put him in handcuffs and they lead him away. And they're choosing to crack down on, I think that is a microcosm, like you were saying, of a broader civilization, choosing to crack down on the white Christian man. That's like the villain, right? And in the homosexual man who's twerking in front of children can have free reign.
Yeah, and it's again going back to the hypocrisy that is shared with the abortion, is like Wisconsin law says that sexualization and those images and depicting sexual acts is illegal.
Right.
And yet I don't know, who was sponsoring it? Was it the city that was sponsoring that event, or was it a different organization? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I know it was the city's police force was there, and there were several dozen police officers. And from what I understand, the folks who were there were telling me that most of them were pretty neutral. They were trying to just kind of keep the peace, but there were a handful who were really trying to make sure that the Christians were quiet and couldn't interfere, right? And it was a public park, so they did have the right to be there. And of course, it's debated whether or not that drag queen group's permit was valid, from what I understand. But
wow.
At the very least, it was a public park. They couldn't just entirely shut down their free speech. But you see the legal bias against the Christians. You had Tony Evers come out, and there were supposed Nazis at this event too. And
I heard.
Yes, and a lot of the media were actually trying to lump them in with the Christians who were there, which is completely dishonest. But you had the governor of Wisconsin, who's a Democrat, come out a few days later and crack down on the Nazis and defend what the drag queens were doing, right? And the question is, by what standard do we say that? Why do we like LGBT over Nazism? And the Christians would say both are bad, right?
Right.
And actually, that young man who was arrested, Marcus Schrader, he went before his city council and gave a speech to that effect, saying, if you guys are so concerned about Nazism, if you believe that we're descendants of pond scum and monkeys, what's to say that any human being has any value? The only reason why you think that human beings have value is because you've been informed by Christianity that's in the cultural water. And as we continue to dismiss that, we're going to get more Nazis and more, grown men twerking on kids.
Amen, man. I mean, that's exactly right. It's exactly right. If there is no moral, if there is no standard by which we live, then you can't make a good argument for Nazis bad.
Right.
What's the point, right? Very good. So, all right, my friend. Well, we're closing up on about an hour. Is there anything else that you would like to? Obviously, I want you to plug all of your socials. Please plug your outlet that you're working for, where we can find you. I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great to be here. First of all, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, man.
It's been enjoyable. Yeah, and I appreciate what you're doing out there in the abortion mills in Kansas, and we're doing that here in Philadelphia too. So I know that it's a hard ministry. So God bless you for doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
me too.
For sure. I'm on Twitter at Ben Zeisloft, just all one word. The Sentinel is republicsentinel.com, and on Twitter we're at Republic Sentinel. So we encourage you to sign up for our email newsletter. That's the best way to get our content. You'll get it right in your inbox every morning. You'll get breaking news alerts. You'll be the first to see that documentary I was talking about with the Navy SEALs who defeated the Biden administration. So that's about it. Yeah, thank you for having me, brother. Yeah.
Yeah, praise God, man. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it just goes to show that if you're incessant on Twitter about bugging people to be on your podcast, eventually they will listen. You just got to keep pushing and pushing. So no, but I know you're a busy guy anyway, and being so newly married, you got a lot going on. So you taking the time out has been a blessing, man. And make sure you guys go out there and sign up for that newsletter. It's free to sign up for, right? So they don't have to pay anything.
Completely free.
Yeah. So in a world where the news is completely untrustworthy, we need to have that sort of thing, and to get it directly into your email mailbox is important. You don't have to tune into faux news or see Communist News Network. You can get the Republic Sentinels right to your email, and then go follow Ben on Twitter. He's always got some great takes, and I appreciate the work that he's done. So God bless you, brother. Thank you guys for tuning in. This episode is out, and we will see you next week.